But really, the big news in sports and the big news in college basketball today is that Scott Drew is staying at Baylor. He has spurned Kentucky. And let's just have a moment of silence for all those people that said, well, Scott Drew will go to Kentucky in a minute. Okay, that's enough.
That's enough, yeah. Plenty.
It's not. And the reason is that the grass is not always greener on the other side. And so here's what we know. A plane left Waco and went to Lexington yesterday. Mm-hmm. While that plane was in the air, Scott Drew was having lunch with his friend Eric Shiro, the CEO of Alliance Bank, big-time booster. And they were eating at Mi Casita. And Mi Casita did, in fact, get a lot of phone calls from Big Blue Nation trying to get to Scott Drew. That plane that did not have Scott Drew on it came back and landed in Temple. That plane did have his family on it. Then this morning, Scott Drew informed Kentucky that he was not taking that job. So here's how I will connect the dots for you. Clearly, his family is a huge part of this.
Yes.
As it should be. And there's a lot going on here that I think they don't want to leave. You know, he's got kids in high school, which if you were watching the triple option earlier, and shame on you if you weren't. I kid, but please do watch it.
Yes, watch.
We want you to watch it. I won't shame you much.
Yet.
But if it goes on much longer, then I'll, Garrett and I will find you. And then we're going to plop Jack in your house to do work and complain about things. And you don't want that. Nobody wants
No,
that.
you don't want those problems.
Nobody wants that problem. Nobody wants those problems. So, but it's a really hard time to move kids when they're in high school. Like
Yes.
little kids, like, you know, you may miss your little friend, but like when you're in high school, like you are really established. You think you know what your life is.
Right, exactly.
It's not what you think it is.
Not at all.
But you think you know what your life is. And so that's a factor. And just look, Ashley Hodge told us on 2 different interviews that he fully believes that Scott is only going to coach 5 to 7 more years.
Correct.
And then retire and enjoy what would at that point be his 60s or there or close to it. If it's 5, it'll be just before. If it's 7, it will be when he turns 60 years old.
Right.
And he wants to enjoy that time in his life. So like Jay Wright is right now, you know, like, and do those things. And Scott will probably do a little bit of TV.
Oh yeah.
You know, he'll be great. He's done that before. He's been great at it. He's so enthusiastic. So he chose to stay at Baylor because this is his programs. This is his program. He built it.
Right.
There's going to be a statue of him out there. They're going to name the court after him. That's going to happen one day.
Go ahead.
And was not going to happen at Kentucky unless he won in those 5 to 7 years.
Probably like 2 or 3.
2 or 3 national titles, which it's hard to do. Look, Danny Hurley made it look as easy as it's been, like from the NCAA tournament last year to now. And I promise you, not one single day of his life has been easy.
No way.
I mean,
No.
So to win 2 in a row, they made it look as easy as you can make it look.
Yeah.
But I promise you that was not easy for anyone. Like the games, they all won by 15 to 20 points.
They were sweating.
There were points, but they were like, oh, we haven't made a shot in 5 minutes. So, and Alan, I'm not talking about you. By the way, you're very loyal.
Alan is loyal. He's definitely loyal.
Alan, I love you. I love you conditionally. But this was about keeping and finishing with what you built. And look, there were a lot of pressures to take the Kentucky job from a lot of people close to him because it's the Kentucky job.
Exactly.
It's a Kentucky job. You can't not listen to it. There are 5 jobs right now that if they came open, because I'm adding UConn to that list.
That they have to be.
Because if Danny Hurley did go to Kentucky like Kentucky wanted him to, then UConn you've got to listen because they've shown the ability. 3 different coaches have won titles.
Yes.
2 of them multiple titles. The guy who won what would have been the fourth one out of 6 was initially their interim coach.
Yeah, he was.
Kevin Ollie.
Yeah, Kevin, yeah.
Like he was an interim coach and then took over. So, you get 3 under Jim Calhoun, you get 1 for Kevin Ollie, and now you have 2 from Danny Hurley. Well, all right, great. That one's going to be there. Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, and Kansas when they're open.
Right.
And, I think on that, like, if there's one that could, like, get an honorable mention, it would be UCLA. Because that's
Just they have the track
that's
record,
John
the
Wooden's
history,
school.
yeah.
Just like, now look, you could compare to UCLA to Alabama in football with Bear Bryant and John Wooden. Now that comparison is over. Like that's over. But like because it's John Wooden's school, like and it's in LA, which is a great they love basketball there. Like that would be one I would listen to, obviously. But maybe not as much as I would. Like even John Calipari turned down UCLA in 2019 to stay at Kentucky.
Which now he's saying he regretted. Which, how convenient was that?
Yeah. Well, look, and so here we are. Scott decides to stay here in Waco. And, it was mildly surprising given what was going on last night where you see a plane landing with his family getting off. But, they've got they're entrenched here. And going, if he was 5 to 8 years younger than he is right now, I would have said look, that's it.
Yeah.
But then you throw in all the factors and it was just too much to turn away from here. This is everything he's built here is now starting to really pay off. And I do believe this. I've talked to several sources off the record about this today, earlier after we found out. I do not think. Now, look, there might be a player that throws out a number that he's like, that's stupid. I'm not doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Best of luck. I'm not going to do that. But if I think now when it comes to NIL,
they're good.
They're solid. And I don't think there's going to be see if you can get them for how about we ask him for a 25% off coupon? That's not going to have to happen anymore. I think he has solidified NIL for the basketball team that will be where if both sides are in the same vicinity, it's going to get done.
Yeah.
That's not to say he's just going to go and use daddy's credit card like a sorority girl on spring break. That's not that's going to happen. Just when they have the opportunities to make those things, they're not going to have to go back and forth.
Right.
The guys are going to be taken care of in all those regards. So, I think it's great news for the Big 12 too.
Yes.
It's really great news for the Big 12 because, and here's the other reason it's great news for the Big 12. There are 2 very real scenarios that would have caused Big 12 dominoes to keep falling. And especially if you start going and poaching your own. So if it was Grant McCaslin, then Tech's got to go get somebody. We'll say Tech then goes to say, well, you know what? We want Jerome Tang now. Well, Jerome Tang is still mad at the, president, which I don't know how much that still exists whatever that is. Okay. Then Kansas State has to go get somebody. Well, what if Kansas State goes and hires an assistant off of the, TCU staff. I'm just saying,
or Alvin Brooks,
or Alvin Brooks. You get to go this round and round and round you go when it comes to all that. So, maybe Baylor wants to hire John Jacobs and then FAU. So now look, does it keep it out of the Big 12? No, because I think TJ Otzelberger is probably at least on the list to,
he should definitely be
to call.
Yeah.
I don't think they're too TJ Otzelberger yet. But his style would seem to fit Kentucky. But also, Scott Drew is a very deeply religious person who every step of the way is moved by his faith.
Which, look, the statement says it.
Yeah, there you go. Jesus, others, then ourselves, or yourselves. So that's the culture of joy. And so when he prayed on it and feels that he's got clarity, believe me, that clarity, he believes in his heart is coming from above. This is not, this is nobody else telling him this. Well, 2 people, God and Mrs. Drew.
Yeah, exactly.
Because again, happy wife, happy life. And if she and your family are going to be happier here, you have to consider that. And one of the things that he has been able to do, which is something a lot of coaches don't get to do, is really put down roots in a place and stay. Mm-hmm. Coaching is an itinerant profession. It is very, very difficult to even successful coaches. So sometimes you're so successful, like you keep, Kalen DeBoer, is really hoping Alabama works out well.
Yeah.
Because then he won't ever have to move again.
Exactly.
Like
the Dan Lanning situation.
Yes.
He said, I found my home. I'm here in Oregon to stay.
And I do think that there's a benefit to that.
I know yesterday.
Tom Osborne probably moved twice in his life once he got the Nebraska job, and is only to get a newer house.
Yeah.
And even then, it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't.
No, that's a good point.
This is the house we bought. This is where our kids were raised. This is where we're going to stay.
Where we're staying.
So,
I felt really confident yesterday. I think we had all talked about this when the picture came out of Drew at Mikasita. I was like, okay, this feels like one where he's saying, this is my underlying message that I'm staying put. And then when everything started circulating, and I believe it was last night when Darby over at KWTX put the poster of the tweet out of his family landing back at Temple, I was like, okay, maybe this is a situation where I started thinking, well, he deflected the family and the flight tracker and everything. Mm-hmm. But the more I started thinking about it, I started to get – go ahead.
He's honestly not that sad.
No, he's probably not, but it just felt like one of those things where you try to put the attention over here, get it away from your family. It is what it is. But I started to get a little nervous at that point because – I was started thinking about the staff, right? Like you just lost Bill Peterson and Jacobs is gone. And I started thinking, well, it's nothing new to him. He's had to reconstruct his staff over the past few years, but is that another element of this where you're looking at it like I could go to Kentucky and put a staff together? But then the more I started thinking about it, because I try to put myself in people's places and in different scenarios and situations. And like you mentioned with the family, like I have a daughter who's in high school. There's no way in hell she would want to move. Like we've had these conversations with the past. Like it's not going to happen. But then like for me and my family, like it's peace and tranquility. And yesterday was the prime example of if you take that job, all of that is gone. Like I've been here pretty much my entire life. I've never seen Scott Drew outside of Baylor. Like, I've never seen them in the public here. Like, they seem to live a life that's pretty off the radar, and that is completely gone if you take that job.
Yeah. There are coaches' wives that have been here, assistant coaches that I've met or all that, through in passing or at games or that know us or whatever. Right. But the longest tenured coach, Scott Drew, like, I've met Kelly Drew like in 19 years of being here, like 3 to 5 times.
Yeah, that's
and the longest I ever talked to her was one time I was walking into a restaurant and they were walking out of a restaurant, and it was like it was like a coaching event. Like they were there and my mom was with me, and so I wanted to introduce my mom to Coach Drew, and then she was right there, so we talked for a second, and that was it. Like it's not like, and there's how many times I'll tell you this: how many times have you seen Kelly Drew on the broadcast, like nervously watching the game? Like, never. I mean, because again,
they might have gotten like one shot over the years, but it's not a consistent thing.
Yeah, no, I mean that's not. And sometimes you see the doting wife that's there, and like, oh my gosh, like watching the game, getting fired up, and that's just not their personality. You go to Kentucky, and already they had stuff on the message boards, like from the people who did. Like it's a lot. It's a different animal.
See, and
this fits him really well, and I fits them really well as a family, and I'm sure, look, he had people in his ear telling him, like, dude, you got to take it. It's Kentucky. It's Kentucky. Kentucky. But sometimes, it's just not the right time. And there was a time, I do believe, that Kentucky would have gotten this done in about 40 minutes.
Dude, I really think if this came out, it's weird to say like 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, you won a natty. You didn't have the Foster built yet. I think even then he probably would have gone. I really do firmly believe Baylor's ability to step up in NIL for basketball. To me, they're starting to shift more. I've always felt like this, and I know people like Baylor fans and stuff have pushed back on me. I view Baylor as a basketball school. I view Baylor like a Michigan State or North Carolina where you're good at football on a regular basis, but basketball is your bread and butter. A lot of people will disagree with that, but that's how I view it. And, like, why would you want to – I don't know. You have everything set in place. There's no need to go to Kentucky when all you're going to get is a little more exposure and more of a headache. Like, why would you even bother with that?
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot like, and again, it used to be, look, and every fan base has their
crazies.
Yeah, they're crazies. But I mean, Kentucky just has them in droves, and one of the things that like you always have to in every situation in life, you have to take the good with the bad, right? Mm-hmm. So the good is you take a job like Kentucky, and when you go on the road.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the SEC tournament was mostly Kentucky fans.
Yep.
If you watch the final between Auburn and A&M, that was dead in Nashville. It's because Kentucky lost, and they just left, and nobody was there to buy their tickets because, Auburn's, I guess reasonably close enough to Nashville where you could decide to run up there and go. College Station is not.
But Auburn's different. But if it was football, they would travel. But, yeah.
But Kentucky fans were there. I remember when Baylor played Kentucky in Atlanta, in the Georgia Dome. Oh, yes, it is. In the Georgia Dome in 2013. 13
would have been 13 or 14.
Yeah, when they won the national title, Anthony Davis.
Yeah,
when the brow. So. Baylor played Xavier in the Sweet 16. And that game was very well attended by Kentucky fans. Baylor, Xavier, and whoever Kentucky was playing before, I now forget. Right. Were not as well represented. And then when the other two teams were out, when you get there like on Saturday or Sunday, whatever that day was, and forgive me, again, I don't remember the exact days because that was the most hectic month of my life of traveling. I wish I would do it. If I was still single, I would try to do it every year, but it was stressful. Yeah. It was awesome. It was great, but it was awesome. It was great. It was awesome, but it was like mind numbing. When you have to fly from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Bowling Green, Ohio, and you have to find a way to get that done in about 18 hours. Like that
don't sound fun.
No.
That sounds tedious.
Also, Bowling Green, Ohio. It's there. Bowling Green, Ohio, an incorporated city. That's what I'll say about it. Bowling Green, Ohio, mostly paved roads. But the amount of fans, like it was 95-5.
Yeah.
And all the Kentucky fans, save for I'm sure there were like a few speckled in there, were sitting here. And then like Mamadou and like a group of Baylor fans were sitting behind me. And that's all I knew.
That's it, yeah.
Honestly, like, you ever see that movie, The 300?
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what it felt like. That's what it felt like. Was like, okay, if there's a brawl here, it better be miraculous like that. But we're taking some casualties no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, it would be one of those things, that's what it felt like. And the Baylor team was already going to have a hard time with that great Kentucky team. It's the last time they won the title.
Loaded.
Anthony Davis is going to maybe
John
be on Hall of Fame.
Who was going to come to Baylor.
Yeah. Remind me to tell you a story in the break about that, by the way.
I'm interested.
It's one I can't tell on the air, but it's a good one. Anyhow, it was you have that, but the problem with it is that because there's so many more people who are nuts.
Yeah,
like you can kind of keep the Baylor crazies in like one little jar.
Yeah, there's a little group of who they are.
There's a little group of the Baylor crazies, right? You cannot like the Kentucky ones. It's like you don't even know, like they're coming from everywhere. They're hiding amongst the normals.
Yeah,
like you can't discern it, and so it's a different thing altogether. We have lots of people lined